Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is Brandon Watts, and today we're going to be going over how to get started with flash ambient real estate photography. But first, let's briefly go over what you're going to need in order to get started shooting. Of course, you're going to want a camera. My preference is going to be a Sony a7S III, although this camera right here is going to be my backup camera. It's an a7 III. I'm using my a7S III to record at the moment, so I'm going to show you how to take pictures on my a7 III. The next thing you're going to want is going to be a lens. I actually prefer a 16 millimeter. You don't want to go too wide, you don't want to go too narrow unless you're going more for an architectural style type of shoot. But for the purposes of standard real estate photography, I prefer a 16 millimeter. This is a 16 to 35 f4 lens. You don't have to go too narrow with your depth of field. In terms of real estate photography, an f4 lens is quite capable of doing what we need to do, because normally we're going to be at an f-stop of around 6 to 7, maybe even in the 9 range. So when you're first starting out, don't really worry about getting a lens that is so shallow on its depth of field. The next thing we're going to want is going to be our flash trigger. This sits on top of the camera, right on its hot shoe, and allows us to trigger our flash without having to use sync cords connected from the flash to the camera. This allows us to walk wherever we want in order to light the property. Then when it comes to the light, what I use is this Wistro AD600BM. It's the same as a Godox strobe light. It's the same as a flash point. This is just what I got. It could possibly be a TTL flash, but I always use manual, so don't stress on having to spend more money on fancier gear. Mostly what we're going to be doing is going to be in all manual settings. I don't rely on any other setting other than manual. Unless I'm in my exteriors, then I'll go to an aperture priority mode and I'll shoot like a 3 to 5 bracket image that then gets merged into a single ambient HDR file. The next most important thing we're going to want is going to be our tripod, of course, because we're taking so many shots that we can't allow the camera to move. So one of the most important things you're going to want is going to be a sturdy tripod. I do not recommend this tripod. It's a SIRUI, I don't know, it's a N1204SK. There's something wrong inside of this tripod that you can actually hear something rolling around inside of there. And I take kind of good care of my tripods. I don't go throwing them around. It's not like I'm climbing any mountains and I'm like slamming this thing all over the place. So, I mean, I take decent care of my tripods. It just sits in the back of my trunk. And within like 2 to 3 months, this error started to happen. So no, I do not recommend this tripod. But I do recommend a sturdy tripod, so that way our camera is not flinching from shot to shot. There are some images where we're going to take about 6 exposures altogether. There are some where it could be 18 to 20 depending on the size of the house and the amount of spaces that you're trying to light inside of one image. So the sturdier the tripod, the better. Now the last thing you're going to want, even though it's not necessary, it does help speed up your workflow, is going to be some kind of phone or tablet. In my case, with the Sony cameras and both Sony cameras, I'm able to connect to an app called the Imaging Edge Mobile. The Sony cameras come with Wi-Fi built in, so that way I can connect through a tablet or a phone and I can wirelessly trigger my camera through the phone without having to touch the camera. That is super important. It helps out with the workflow, because other than that, what I used to do was set a timer on the camera and then have to run back and forth and light the different spaces of the room just so that way I can achieve a higher quality of image. I was willing to do that for that quality of image, but some other people might not. So for me, what I like is this app. What I also have is a Cam Ranger 2, but ever since I got the a7S III, I switched to just using the a7S III over the Cam Ranger 2, because the upload speed from the camera to the phone was just as quick as the Cam Ranger compared to my a7 III, which actually has a bit of lag when I'm trying to review each image after each shot. So the faster your system gets, the better for you, the more you can shoot each day, and that just means more money overall. So now that we're here at the camera, we're going to want to connect the phone to the camera. And for Sony cameras, it's quite easy. There's an NFC chip on the side of the camera, so all I have to do is just swipe the phone to the side, and now we're connected. You can instantly see that I have a live view on my phone. It has some settings on there, but compared to the a7S III, it actually lacks a lot of capabilities. in which I'm not able to change certain settings like the drive mode and things like that. With the A7S III, it's more hands off the camera as I can control a lot more settings through this app. But for the purposes of this tutorial, it's okay. I'm currently on a auto white balance. I'm at 1/8 at ISO 100. ISO 100 is typically too low for flash power, especially if you're just starting out. You're not going to have a lot of flash power to expose around ISO 100. So for our instance, or at least in my instance, I'm going to go to ISO 320. In your instance, as a beginner, you might have less flash power, so you might want to do ISO 400, maybe ISO 500. I wouldn't want to go too high because if you're stacking too many layers of, say, ISO 800, that's going to be a lot of layers of 800 stacked together, and your photo, in my opinion, is just going to be a little bit too grainy for my standards. So for me, I prefer ISO 320. I'll go ahead and change that, and you can see how the image brightens up. I'm already at an f-stop of 6.3. I typically like 6.3. It's a nice balance. If I were to narrow that f-stop from 6.3 down to around 7, 9, 11 for an f-stop, you're gonna need more flash power to expose around that f-stop. So for me, I like 6.3 at ISO 320. Right now we're at 1/8 of a shutter speed, and it's showing that the room is currently exposed at 1.3 of a stop over the middle of the histogram. That's okay because it looks quite nice and exposed. For this, what's going to be an HDR image, we will switch in the camera to a continuous bracket at 2 stops apart, 3 images total. I'm going to trigger that with my phone, and it's as easy as that. Now everything comes to my phone. I can review it real quick if I want. That's okay there. Next thing I'm going to want to do is to start exposing for our flash pops. So I'm going to decrease the shutter speed, or actually speed up the shutter speed. For me, my sync speed is at 1/250, so I can't go any past that for my trigger or my flash. And so that's why I like this balance, because if we were to look out these windows and I were to zoom in, you can see that everything is exposed nicely for. There is still some detail in the clouds, which is nice. There's not a whole lot, but that's okay. We're not trying to expose all the way through right now. I'll teach you how to do that in a later tutorial, but for the purposes of getting through this one, this is a good exposure. I'll go ahead and zoom back out. Now we can turn on the flash trigger on top of the camera. And what we're gonna wanna do, or at least what I do, is I go to a custom white balance. This one is set at 3100K. I'm at 1/8. We'll go to 1/4 flash power, and I'll pop right over the camera. And as you can see, that is too blue. That is too blue. So what we'll have to do is, inside the camera, we'll go to our custom white balance. I'm at 3100K. I'll go ahead and just increase that. We'll say 4500K. 45, let's try 4500K. 1/4 still on the flash power. Take that shot. We'll review the image, and that looks better. That looks a lot better on the color, but it's a little dim now. One of those reasons is because we forgot to change back to a single drive mode. So it was taking a dark, middle, and bright exposure for our flash pops. We don't want to do that. So for our flash only shots, we're going to be at a single frame exposure. Still at 1/4 of a flash power. We'll pop that right over the camera. And now you can see that the room is slightly too bright. So I'll go ahead and decrease that by 2/3 of a stop. Take another shot. And that looks a lot better. That looks a lot better. So now what we can do is we'll go ahead and come over here to the left side of the frame. And what this is going to do, once we take this shot, is it's going to start to add shadows and contrast into the image. Now, when you're only taking one flash pop above the camera, what you're essentially doing is wiping out all the shadows because it acts as an on-camera flash, and that's not flattering when you're just flashing your subject full of light. So what we're doing here is adding our own shadows and contrast, because you can see here we have lights above head, we have a small light here, we have a ceiling light here, and then we have 2 large windows that are coming up from the right-hand side of the frame. And so This is going to be our left side pop. We're going to come over to the other side. Now I'm not changing any settings, so I'm going to go ahead and take that to the left side, take that shot right there. And if you were to see here on the left hand side of the frame, that is slightly too dim. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to raise this flash power back to 1/4 power, hit that with a flash. We'll wait for this to come back up, review the image. Now you can see that that is better exposed here on the left compared to this last image where it was just slightly too dark. So this pop was a lot better. Now the only thing we have to do is go and light these little side rooms. Now for the bathrooms, they're smaller shots, so what I'll do is go ahead and drop my flash power to about 1/16 to start. I'm gonna get out of the frame of this camera, pop it right here, boom. Okay, we're gonna see how this image turns out. And I'd say that looks pretty good. There is a little bit of a shadow on the left-hand side of the door, but that's okay because naturally, as you look inside the bathroom, there is a half bath in there and part of a wall from that bath is blocking the light. So that would be a natural occurring shadow, relatively speaking. Now we can go and light this bedroom. I'm going to go from 1/16 since it's a small bathroom to about 1/8 since it's a smallish bedroom. It's not really medium size, but it's fairly small. Okay, now we can review this image. Looks quite nice. It's slightly overexposed, but that's going to be brought back by the ambient layer that we put on top of everything. So now we can take all these layers into Lightroom and Photoshop. I'll show you how to blend them into one image, and you'll be well on your way to starting your own flash ambient real estate photography career. Okay, so now we're here in Lightroom, and we have to figure out how to put all of these images together into one single flash ambient image. You can see that we have our 3 exposures from light to dark or from dark to light. These are going to be our 3 exposures that we try to get for our white balance. We actually don't need these, so I'm going to remove them. Remove photos. I'll just remove from Lightroom. I won't delete them. Now all we have is our darken color repair flash pop, our left side flash, and our right side flash. Now you can see here how this first right side flash was just too dim right here on the left hand side of the wall compared to this one. So I'll go ahead and just remove this. We don't need that either. Remove from Lightroom. Now what I can do is just go ahead and select the first one, hold down shift, select the last one, go over to sync and just enable that little selection right there so that way it turns on your auto sync. So that way any selection that we make to one image is going to be made to all of the images. And what we're going to want to do is go ahead and drop the highlights a little bit by about half. Raise the shadows a little bit by about half. Doesn't have to be exact. Then we'll go down to our lens corrections. I already have enable profile corrections set. You'll want to make sure that yours is set as well. Turn on remove chromatic aberration. Go into manual and we'll just hit that defringe by about 2 to 3 for both the magenta and the green. And those are all the adjustments I'm going to make to these images. Now what I want to do is adjust the white balance, so I'll just select the flash pops. I will go to, let's see here, I'll go into this inside flash pop here where there's white near the flash. I'll hit W to bring up the eyedropper tool. If you don't know where the eyedropper tool, it's going to be under basic, and it's this little white balance selector. Hit W to bring that up, and we can just hit something that's a little white right there to adjust that white balance. So now you can see that these are all practically the same. I can go ahead and select all these again, right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. And while these load up, don't forget to like and subscribe to help out the channel. Everything helps out with the algorithm, including engaging in the comments, so I definitely appreciate everybody's engagement. Thank you to all the subscribers and viewership. I always appreciate each and every one of you. Okay, now the photos are loaded. What we're going to want to do is first merge our 3 exposure bracket. And if you saw my last video on how to do that, it's quite simple. So I'm just going to hit it with an HDR merge action to quickly do that. Now that that is completely merged, from here, we're going to want to turn this into our 50% luminosity blend. So we'll do a Control or Command J to duplicate. This bottom layer is going to be our safety layer. It'll be, in case we need it, it'll be a backup. So let's just go and disable that visibility. Now we can work on this one. We can set this to luminosity, layer blend. Drop this down to about 50%. And that is a 50% luminosity blend right there. What I want you to get used to doing is creating a layer inside of this ambient blend that is going to be another safety layer. We're going to drop this to color. We won't need it for this image, I don't think, but you will want it for other images like in kitchens where you have flash glares. So we'll go ahead and hit it with a black mask. We don't need it right now. Hold down Shift, click both layers, and then do a Control or Command G to group. This will be our 50% ambient blend. Now we disable that. You can see that we have our flash pops to work with. This first one is going to be our darken color repair. You can see that it brings in the correct color. It actually might seem a little bit blue here, so let's go ahead and do a Control Shift A to bring up the camera raw. And we can just adjust this ever so slightly. There we are, about there. Hit OK. That looks nicer. Okay, so this one is going to be our darken color repair. We'll go ahead and drop this down to darken layer blend. We will do a Control or Command J to duplicate, and this will be our color layer blend. You can see how by turning that off and on, and if I were to zoom in, how this color here from that flash pop is a little blue compared to when I turn that back on. It kind of brings back the correct color. So a Control or Command 0 to zoom back out to the extent of the image. We will go ahead and group these two together. Call that our darken color repair. And now, so why is that a darken color repair? I just told you that it fixes the color, but what about the darken? Now you can see that these flash pops, these side-to-side flash pops right here, are gonna cause these flash glares to arise in glass and on reflections like this TV right here. So just by turning on that darken color repair, you can see how anything that's too bright is removed by anything that's darker from the layer that's above. So this frame, this artwork right here is darker than that bright flash pop. So it's gonna repair that and mask it out. So let's go ahead and finish this blend. We'll go ahead and turn off the visibility for the darken color repair. Add a white layer mask. Make sure that you have a black foreground. Hit D to reset your colors. X for X-ray to switch your colors to a black foreground. You'll hit G for gradient. Come up to this delta right here. Drop down your basics tab. And you're going to want to make sure that you have a foreground to transparent gradient. Then you'll want to be sure you're on a linear gradient. You don't want to select any of these other gradients. We want a linear gradient set to a normal blend mode at 100% opacity. Then we'll hold down Shift, and what we want to do is blend out this large bright area that's on the left hand side of the room. So we're going to click ahead of this bright spot here on the ceiling. Hold down Shift, click halfway across the room, and you can see how now we are blended out of both sides. Oh, there we go. With just that gradient blend, let's blend that a little bit better. So I'm going to come back further into the image, hold down Shift, click, and drag further to the right hand side. So that way this blend here blends nicer, blends a little bit more evenly compared to before, where it was thicker right here. This is going to be a better of a blend since we were dragging from the further left edge to the right hand edge. There you go. See how that blends nicely? So now we can re-add the darken color repair, which fixes that color. Look at that That color right there, it's going to go from a little bit of a magenta to more of a natural look. We can then focus on our bottom back rooms. And since we have a darken color repair right here, anything that's dark is going to show through. So these back rooms are obviously darker than these flash pops. So what we have to do is go ahead and bring up these flash pops, these back rooms above the darken color repair. And we can either set it to both layers to either lighten, blend mode, or to screen. Each one has their pros and cons. Let me show you screen. For screen, if I were to group these two images and then zoom in, you will start to see that whenever I disable these back rooms, parts of the image gets a little bit dimmer compared to when I re-enable it. These luminance values get applied to the entirety of the image, and parts of the image get brighter even though we don't necessarily want it to. This is even more apparent in the windows. See how I turn off that group right there? How you can see clearer through the windows compared to if I turn back on these back rooms. These luminance values all get applied to the entirety of the image. Now if I were to compare that to lighten, and if I were to turn this off and on, you can see that only the back rooms get brighter, not the entirety of the image. But there is discoloration that happens between the light and dark areas of these blends. And so in order to fix that, you would have to brush it out or mask it out. But what I typically like to do is just set these to screen. I'll zoom out, make sure that these are grouped. I'll hit M for marquee. I'll just make a selection over these rooms right there. I'll do a Shift F6 to bring up my feather selection. And then I'll just mask that by about 100 pixels. Hit that with a mask. And now you can see that only that part of the image is affected compared to without the mask. See how that gets brighter? Those windows aren't exposed as nicely. So that's one way to fix the issue of having screen apply the luminance values to the entire image. We can re-add our ambient blend, and now you can see that things look quite nice, though there is a issue here from our darken color repair layer, our first flash pop, because there's this bright flash right here that's causing a discoloration in the color. I don't like that. Anything that's too bright or too underlit is going to cause discoloration. And so one way to fix that is just to select your color layer inside the darken color repair, hit it with a mask, hit B for brush, and then just brush that right out. Bam. Control or Command 0 to zoom back out. That is looking rather nice. You can see that without the darken color repair, those flash pops, those flash glares start to reveal through in any reflective surface. But if we re-add that, those glares are taken care of. But what about the side-to-side flash? So this is just your normal flambient technique right here. Usually what people teach you is to do your 50% ambient blend, followed by a single flash pop above the camera, tilt it up and backwards, which this is what that is. But now, as we start to add the side-to-side flash pops, we add a little bit more shadow and contrast, whereas this was just a little too sterile. This starts to reintroduce shadows that weren't there before, because this flash pop right here just wipes out those shadows. And now by reapplying those side-to-side flash pops, you can see that shadows are now reintroduced. It looks quite nice compared to the standard flambient. So we can finish this image by doing a Control or Command plus Alt or Option plus Shift plus E to merge all visible. Do a Control or Command plus Shift plus A to bring up your camera raw. We'll go ahead and hit it with a little auto to see what it gives us. That's not a bad start. We'll raise that a little bit. It was a bright interior. It's going to drop the shadows back to 0. Highlights are decent. I've been talking to other photographers and they state that they don't like adding vibrance or saturation to their images, so I've been giving that a shot. I don't like to add vibrance or saturation now to my images. Otherwise it's just too saturated, in my opinion, as well as other professional photographers. So try not to go overboard the way that I used to with those sliders. Let's go and bring in some more contrast. Hit it with OK. Now that looks good. That looks good. Now for those of you who think that this is just way too long of a process, once you have all your steps planned and you stick to a system, it's super easy just to create an action that takes care of everything for you. So that way, instead of having to repeat all these steps over and over and over again, they're automatically just taken care of for you. And all you have to do is just worry about the basic stuff. So let me go and just invert that. There you go, right there. Now everything is blended together. I can go ahead and just mask out these back rooms. Super quick and super easy. Now my windows are looking quite nice. My highlights are exposed. Let's see what else. I can also take care of that flash pop in the back on that darken color repair. Now I can merge. And I'd say we are just about done. So you can't really say it takes too long to process an image because it all comes down to your system. If you don't have a system, then you can't really create an action. But if you do have a system, you can repeat your steps over and over again so that all you have to do is just let Photoshop take care of it for you. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below. I appreciate everybody's support. Thank you all for coming out. Take care and have a great day.